Good morning. I'm going to go ahead and make a video now of what we would have been discussing in class today. Please keep in mind that there are going to be some modifications because if we had met in class, there would have been some group work. So since we are not gathered together, we're going to be just having to, I'll be talking about it, of course, on this video a little bit differently. So this week's module discusses standards and guidelines. So let's talk about what standards are. The definition of what a standard is it's a requirement, a specification, a guideline, vocabulary, or any method that can be used to improve value, compatibility, and consistency. And while we'll be focusing on how standards are used in healthcare, I want to take a step back and look how it is focused on in other facets. Okay, so for example, let's look at the first one here, industry. And by industry, we could look at national or international. And so the example that I use in class is the manufacturing industry. And a little fun fact about me is when I first graduated high school, before I went to college, I actually worked in a factory for 5 years, um, in a manufacturing factory, and I worked on an assembly line. And we assembled radiators for a particular type of car. So we had standards that had to be met in order for that car part, that radiator, that finished radiator, to be put into that car. If it didn't meet those specifications, then it wasn't good enough to be put into a car for a human, a person to drive for safety. So there are certain guidelines that had to be met. So when we think about standards, there are standards in all facets, right? So that's just one specific type. So let's look at the other ones. When we think about um, quality standards, just take a moment and think about how you would look at um, standards and quality. And quality comes across in healthcare, and it also comes across in the industry. Like I just talked about for the manufacturing, we had a quality assurance department that had to make sure that the quality of our parts that we were assembling were they met the satisfaction and the specification to be put into those cars. So, but when we talk about quality standards, you look at the continuous improvement or those quality outcomes. You want to make sure that there's efficient adherence to those regulatory requirements and also those compliance. Um, and then there's also a reduced process variation for product defects. You want to make sure that there are no defects because what happens if you produce let's say, a radiator, in the case where I worked in manufacturing, that didn't work properly, but you placed it in a car that was then driven by a person. So they're driving with a defective radiator. That's not conducive to, what it needs to be done. So that doesn't meet the quality standards. And then we move on to professional standards. And think about that for a moment. There are a lot of standards in the professional world, and professional and employment could almost be grouped together. They're almost parallel, and some of them will even cross over. We look at accountability, um, confidentiality, and if you notice, some of these that I'm speaking of are also crossing over into healthcare. Okay, a lot of these will also, quality also crosses over into healthcare. So a lot of these are similar. These standards that we talk about outside of healthcare have to do with the industry, the quality, professional employment also have to cross over, and they are parallel with healthcare as well. We look at honesty in a professional world, in the employment as well. Same with healthcare. Integrity, having strong moral principles. Law abiding follows all governing laws in the jurisdictions that they perform activities. That also crosses over into healthcare. Loyalty, you remain committed to your profession. Objectivity, so you're not swayed or influenced by biases. And then there's also transparency, revealing all relevant information and not concealing anything. So those are all professional standards, and they also can be considered employment standards. And then when we look at safety standards, so what are some examples of safety standards? And if you think about it, safety also, we look at healthcare. We want to make sure that our patients, their safety is of utmost importance, right? But in a manufacturing world, we have to make sure that safety guidelines are followed, safety standards are met, so that to prevent falls and prevent any type of exposure to infectious diseases, ensuring the safety of workers who enter any type of confined spaces, and then preventing any exposure to any type of harmful substances such as asbestos or lead. And you have to make sure that, like a manufacturing department, that there are guards on certain types of machines. So again, that safety protocol crosses over into healthcare. We have to make sure that we wear protective gear. If we are entering a patient's room that may, have certain types of illnesses, we have to make sure that we are protecting ourselves and then also protecting them from us. So that safety again crosses over. And then we look at the food standards. Food has to be refrigerated at a certain temperature, has to be served at a certain temperature. You have to have good hand hygiene. So there are certain standards that have to be met there as well. So what are standards in healthcare? We just talked about a few of them, how they cross over. They also have requirements, specifications, guidelines, and characteristics that are similar to the ones that we just talked about on the previous slide. So to go a little bit more in detail with healthcare standards, I want to look at these 8 that you see here on your screen. Looking at the first one, clinical standards. If you take a moment and think about what clinical standards would be, these focus on the quality of clinical care, treatment, as well as interventions. They outline best practices for diagnosing as well as treating medical conditions, ensuring that healthcare providers adhere to evidence-based guidelines. And then taking a look at patient safety standards, which we talked about for a little bit on the previous slide. Patient safety, again, is a top priority in healthcare. Standards in this category address practices and protocols to help prevent errors, infections, as well as other adverse events that could harm patients during the course of their medical care. And in class, we've talked about, medication errors, making sure that there are no adverse reactions. And the list can go on and on. There are so many different things that we could talk about with that. And number 3 here on the screen, you see accreditation standards. Healthcare organizations often seek accreditation from relevant authorities or accrediting bodies. Accreditation standards ensure that healthcare facilities meet specific criteria related to infrastructure, staffing, patient care, as well as overall organizational performance. So those standards have to be met as well. And then number 4, information and technology standards. As healthcare becomes increasingly reliant on technology, those standards for the management and protection of health information, as well as the interoperability of healthcare IT systems, those are crucial. And it's always going to be more and more crucial as we advance. And number 5, looking at ethical standards. For anybody that hasn't, if you haven't taken the ethics class yet, you will be in the upcoming semesters, but you'll learn more about ethics. Healthcare professionals are bound by ethical standards that govern their conduct, ensuring integrity, confidentiality. Oh, I lost my microphone there for a second. Sorry about that. There it is. Okay, and respect for patients' autonomy. Ethical guidelines, they also address issues like informed consent as well as end-of-life care. So that's why that is another, that almost should be at the top of this list above clinical standards, because we have to remain ethical. We have to hold our moral compass in check as far as it comes to standards. And number 6 on the list here is regulatory standards. Governments and regulatory bodies establish standards to govern the licensing, certification, as well as overall compliance of healthcare providers and organizations. These standards often vary by region and are enforced through regulatory agencies. And then looking at quality improvement, again, there's that quality, how it crosses over. Continuous quality improvement is pertinent to healthcare. It is another one of those top-notch standards. The standards in this category, they focus on monitoring, evaluating, as well as enhancing the quality of healthcare services over time. And then number 8, cultural competency standards. With diverse patient populations, cultural competency standards ensure that healthcare providers are sensitive to and capable of addressing the cultural needs and preferences of all patients. So all of these are important. They're important healthcare standards, and there are more, but these are just 8 that we are talking about today. So I know it says on this slide, it says group presentation, and we are not together to form groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm putting it in, I'm leaving it up to each of you. You'll see here listed HL7, Fire, DICOM, FDA, and HIPAA. All 5 of these are very important healthcare standards, okay? If we were together, you would be divided into, depending on how many are in the class, you would be divided into groups of, 4 or 5, maybe even 3, depending on how big our class is. So you'd be divided into groups, and each group would be assigned one of these topics. So one group would present on HL7 next week, another would present on Fire, another one DICOM, another one FDA, and the other one HIPAA. But since we are not together, and if I were to assign this on Thursday, if we were to get together, there wouldn't be enough time for you to gather information and present for the next week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this up to you. If you have someone that's in the class and you want to work together as partners or as a group and put together a PowerPoint presentation, you do not have to present it to the class. You can if you'd like, or I'm also giving you the option if you'd like to record it. You can record a presentation either by yourself, with a partner, as a group, on your chosen. You get to choose from these 5 standards. You choose the one that you want to research and present. Okay, so make sure you choose the one here, and I'm going to upload, obviously this video will be uploaded so you'll be able to see it, but this is what you're going to do. And you have the choice to write a paper too. I feel like sometimes doing a PowerPoint is more fun, but that's your choice. So whatever standard you choose, you're going to answer these questions. How does your standard or guideline relate to healthcare? What are the pros and cons? And why is it important that this standard or guideline is used? And include in your summary your opinions on the use of these standards and whether they are helping the case for an interoperable healthcare system. So no longer the 10-minute presentation if that's what you choose to do. Make sure you use a title slide as well as a reference slide so I know where you found your information. And if you do decide to write a paper, that's fine. 3 pages, but that doesn't include your title page and your reference page. So 3 pages of content. But it's up to you. Your choice. I'm leaving it in your hands. You can do it by yourself. Again, you can record a PowerPoint presentation by yourself, with a friend, as a group, or you can write a paper by yourself. The paper can only be done by yourself. The paper cannot be with a group, okay? If you're writing a paper, that is a solo, that is by yourself. If you're doing a presentation, whether it's recorded or in front of the class, that can be by yourself, with a friend, or as a group, okay? So if you have questions, please let me know. Email me, send me a message in Canvas. I'll have the classroom open on Thursday, that if you'd like to come in and work on this, you are more than welcome to, because I'll be in the building. Granted, we don't have any more weather like this. Again, reach out to me with any questions, and I hope you all have a safe and great day. Thank you.